We'll move on to the engagement section, the external facing part of our meeting, and we're going to start with engagement visits that board members have made outside of the board to other parts of the organisation or to other stakeholders. Sue and Nick, you've been out and about since our last meeting. Do you want to give us a quick feedback on anything very significant that struck you or that you learned or that you think we should hear about in your meetings?
Shall I start? Yeah.
Please.
I mean, I personally found it an extremely useful experience, and it reminded me again how important it is that the non-execs do go out and visit those sites that are involved in delivering the work. I was struck just by how positive and how committed and actually how loyal a lot of the staff we spoke to. And they talk about NHS Direct in very, very positive terms, with a sense of ownership, which I thought was very interesting, given the comments we just had around the sickness discussion. So I took a lot of heart from that. It sort of split into two. We actually had the opportunity to meet a lot of individual staff, to listen to calls, and actually a third element was to actually meet some of our partners with the East Midlands 111 service. If we just deal with the last one first, I thought that really demonstrated a very positive partnership working arrangement. We had the ambulance service there, and we also had the SHA there. There were, however, some interesting discussions, and I suppose there are two elements that I think just struck me. There was one around the absolute need to get a baseline so that we can compare the services as it was before to what we're doing now, so that we can clearly demonstrate the value of the service, one way or another. And that baseline, I think, there's still some way to go in terms of getting that baseline. Without it, we're a little bit blind. So both Nick in particular stressed the need to get that baseline. I think that's very important. The second element that struck me was the focus on the ambulance end and urgent referrals into the GP. There's not a lot around the discussion around self-care, and again, Nick was clear about the need to raise the importance of self-care in the 111 service.
Yeah, good.
We visited Chesterfield and we visited Nottingham, and we listened into some 111 service calls, which demonstrated some interesting lessons around the number of calls that are being transferred, or being dealt with within the health advisor position, and those that go to the nurse advisor, and those that ultimately went to a 999 disposition, which is one that Nick listened into. And there's definitely a need for some clarity around those dispositions and what is happening with the 111. I think that's probably my observation.
Nick, you were out and about a lot more, so I mean, it's more.
Yeah, I'll just add two other very quick things that I think came up. The first is child protection work. In that particular part of the world, there's an Ofsted inspection, and that's a multi-agency inspection, and that creates a great big peak of activity and work, which the regional child protection person was feeling the brunt of. And I think what we subsequently were quite comforted about was the fact that the network of child protection specialists work together to even out the workload, and therefore there's a degree of sharing between them to overcome those kind of lumps in work. So there was a bit of a flurry of activity going on because of the need to go through all that. But it was a kind of comforting thing that I think the board would like to hear. The second, which illustrates a kind of generational gap, which was, we were talking about annual leave. and there definitely is an issue around annual leave, its availability, and the system that staff use. And I described it as like getting Glastonbury tickets, and they looked blankly at me and said, no, you mean it's like getting Take That tickets. I didn't have the first clue what they were talking about. Anyway, but seriously, the underlying point is that we have a process that staff are using to get annual leave, and that process is one where if you're quick and on the ball, you can get your requests in, and if you're not, then you're behind at the back of the queue. So I know that's something that Renette and others are looking at. It was a real source of, and this is a different point from why am I having to work on Christmas Day, which was not a point that was raised, I have to say, but simply about the process. And we need to make sure that process feels fair for staff, not just about, and everybody understands that and they did understand, you can't have everybody off at the same day. It isn't about that, it's about the process, and being able to take that tickets.
Okay. Done. Thank you. Okay, Trevor, you've been. I
mean, a very, very brief point. I mean, that is one of the and it's a very good illustration of some of the work we need to do, which, along with a lot of other work, will help our sickness absence numbers. There are a number of things where we've made changes. The changes haven't been embedded well enough, and we've got to systematically do that work in order to improve the service we give to the people who work with.
Okay, Ruth?
I wanted to pick up on Sue's point around the baseline of what's happening now. So, as you'll be aware, the department has requested more 111 pilots, and one of the requirements to becoming a pilot is that the commissioner must have access to baseline information in terms of what's happening now with 999 referrals, A&E attendances, GP out of hours, because I was quite surprised that actually a number of our current commissioners don't have that information in one place or regularly collected.
Okay, thank you. All right, Trevor, you've been. Oh, Renette.
So was Trevor? Which Trevor?
Trevor Jones. I was going to point at him about some other external engagement.
Sorry.
So that
I had one other thing then about visits. It was related to. Shall I raise it now or?
Yes. Yeah. Why not?
So Christmas.
Yes.
We've talked about this before.
Yeah, we have.
Board members are all very welcome to visit their local or even non-local call centres, as long as you come bearing chocolate and gifts and don't get in the way generally of that which is happening.
Yeah.
So I know the staff really do appreciate it actually when they see non-frontline faces in call centres. I'll personally be in several call centres on Christmas Day and Boxing Day, and as will other colleagues. But just for this little small period, if we could be supportive rather than taking people offline, that would be very useful.
Yeah, agreed. Trevor, you've been interacting with or have facilitated some stakeholder engagement with the WRVS. I don't know if you just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, just very briefly, WRVS, if people don't know, is an organisation led by volunteers to provide practical help to elderly people, to allow them to live much more positive lives. I was contacted by our comms team just to make contact into the WRVS, and at the last board meeting of WRVS there was a very, very positive feedback about a partnership that's developed where NHS Direct information will be available at all WRVS outlets to help older people, if they need help and support, to get it using us rather than necessarily ringing their GPs. So I thought very, very positive, and perhaps a way forward for other organisations doing similar things, because we're trying to increase our profile. Relatively easy way to do it is to fit into other networks.
Yeah, very good. And potentially, thinking about that, that's a more powerful message to other voluntary organisations if it comes from the WRVS. Look, this has helped us, rather than us taking that message or at least taking it together. So that's good, thank you. A great example. Then Tim and Louisa, you've been to Birmingham Own Health, but I think what we were suggesting is we might defer that conversation to the private part of the meeting because we have an item on Birmingham Own Health in that. Is that?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Right, let's then...
Sorry, Joanne, can I make
sorry,
one
Ruth.
final point? I have emailed the board, but just to remind you, when you're visiting, if you could include a meeting or visit with the regional director. I think they like to feel that, you know, the board is equally interested in the external environment within which they're working and the challenges that we're facing. So if I leave it to the executive director to be responsible for linking in with the regional director to arrange that.
Good, that would be an added benefit from those sorts of meetings. Very good, thank you. We're now going to move on to an initiative which, Trish, I imagine you're going to lead us through this.
Yes.
So this was a broader set of ideas about how the board can engage with the reality of the service that we deliver. And I think Louisa's point earlier about the substance of complaints is something that we might want to consider. So we've had the paper. Do you just want to perhaps introduce it very briefly and then we can have a discussion about it?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this paper is a goal-listen initiative led by the Chief Nurse and Clinical Director. It's following the Francis inquiry into the Mid-Staffs Trust, and one of the recommendations was board members and senior managers should ensure they understand the services that the Trust deliver. And you'll all be aware of the number of initiatives that we are undertaking in order for that to happen. We have introduced a number of ways that the board and senior managers can ensure that they are able to carry out their responsibilities, and they are listed there. We've already heard today that there are a number of non-executive visits going along across the organisation. You've already received voice recordings, undertake site visits, and further aspects are patient stories, meeting with patients, attending PPI meetings, etc. So really the request is for the board to sign up to this initiative and for us to be able to take it forward.
Okay, so I'm sure board members will have comments and reactions to the ideas, particularly in paragraph 2.1 of the paper. Does anybody want to kick that off?
Could I just check process? I always assume that I'm available, and if I'm needed, someone will ring and say, can you come to do X, Y, or Z? Rather than me ringing up saying, you know, I want to visit something for the next week, can you pick something up? Is that how the process works? So my phone being relatively quiet.
I think it's still. I don't think that's how we are currently seeking to schedule your time in that way. I think it would be helpful to sign up to that methodology, and then we'll start scheduling people.
Yeah. So at the moment, the situation is we leave it to the non-executives to show the initiative and say, well, I think I could do with some visits. So that's where we are at the moment.
Yeah, that's right.
I wonder whether that's a better place to be than us trying to chase non-executives to say, well, it's about time you... I don't know.
I'd like to think that there will be opportunities where it would be helpful to have a non-executive input.
Yeah.
That's better than things saying, you know, I'm free on Friday morning, I'm coming whether you want me or not. You know.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, so that's a great response. Trish, Tim, Louisa.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I agree. I think it should be a two-way process. I think we discussed earlier at the beginning of the board meeting about stakeholder engagement, about our future with GP commissioners. There will be relationships the non-execs have with those stakeholders. So I think this is a good example of two-way process where the non-execs do make the initiative, but equally if there is an event or a particular stakeholder we wish to engage and there are those contacts, then we as executives can make contact with the appropriate non-exec and establish that meeting.
Okay, good. That sounds great. Louisa?
I think Ruben
The couple of observations I wanted to make were really about the emphasis of the Go Listen initiative, which is delightfully clinical quality, which I obviously approve of, but I don't think is the only reason we go out to the sites.
No.
I think that we need to have a very balanced take on when we go of who we talk to and what we see, and whilst the clinical part is very important and perhaps it does need its profile raising a little bit, I don't think it should be to the exclusion of many of the operational issues without which the clinical can't be delivered. So that's the first point. The other point